finally, we come to the 20th century, which, when we usually think about the American dream, this is where we come to, the 20th century. And therefore, the American dream is largely defined by the visual media and the visual narratives that dominate the 20th century. So television and the Joneses, I already talked about that. This epitome of America that is then piped into American homes, right? So television shows like Leave It to Beaver, The Brady Bunch, right? This kind of perfect American family that we all then compare ourselves to. They're largely middle class, suburban, and white, right? So that becomes the vision of the American dream. Standalone house with a 2-car garage and a white picket fence, 2.3 kids, maybe a dog, a good job at a local factory, perhaps teacher, right? This middle class lifestyle, which is very concrete in its construction. This is what the middle class looks like. At the same time, we have a massive rise in commercialism and materialism. That is to say, the American dream is now defined not by what you have achieved, but what you own and what you have. At the same time, the argument of what you have is supposed to be synonymous with what you have achieved. I have achieved enough to have this house. I have achieved enough to buy these shoes. I have achieved enough to go vacationing in the south of France, right? That we show our achievements through our purchases. Having said that, we also have a rise in credit. So people can look like they have achieved things by purchasing items without necessarily having the money to do so. One of my favorite lines is this line from David Ramsey: "We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like." At the same time, we start to see how the rhetoric of the American dream is no longer sufficient, and groups that have been largely left behind or systematically and on purpose left out of the American dream are demanding equality. So another quote from Cullen in the intro says, "The term, the American dream, seems like the most lofty as well as the most immediate component of an American identity, a birthright. That by being born in this nation, I should have the right to opportunity." And for decades, nay centuries, the majority of people here have not had the opportunity, have not had this right to an opportunity. And when I say majority, I'm talking about a population that's 51% women, a population, combine that with a population that's 11 to 13% black, a population that is at the time 3% Asian, 1% indigenous. The indigenous population, which once was 100%, is now 1%, right? So the majority of individuals have not had this opportunity and this access that is written into and declared as a birthright. And that was no longer acceptable. Technically, it was never acceptable. But in the 20th century, we start to see active movements towards achieving equality, demanding equality, including civil rights for black folks, women's rights, queer rights, working rights, right? And the working class revolutions, protests of the 20th century as well. So we see these classes of people that have been largely discarded saying, no, this is our birthright.